They were sitting inside a plain brown envelope on the passenger seat of my truck as I drove home through the cold October rain in Nashville, Tennessee. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. After 15 years of marriage, I believed there was nothing left to save. My wife had become distant, secretive, and emotionally unavailable. Every conversation ended in silence. Every dinner felt like two strangers sharing the same table. I had convinced myself that love had quietly died, until one accidental moment changed everything. Before I stepped inside our house that evening, I overheard a confession she made to her mother that shattered every assumption I had carried for months. And what I heard made me question whether I had been fighting the wrong battle all along. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, forgiveness, and second chances still matter in this world, please take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another inspiring story. My name is Nathan Brooks, and for most of my adult life, I believed I understood what commitment meant. I worked as a construction supervisor, leaving home before sunrise and returning long after sunset. My wife, Grace Brooks, had always been the heart of our family. She remembered birthdays, planned vacations, filled every holiday with warmth, and somehow managed to make our modest little home feel like the safest place in America. We had one daughter, Abigail, who had recently left for college in Ohio. The day she drove away, something inside our home changed forever. The laughter disappeared. The hallway suddenly echoed. The empty bedroom became a painful reminder that time had moved faster than either of us expected. At first I assumed Grace simply missed our daughter, but weeks turned into months, and the sadness never lifted. She stopped smiling the way she used to. She stayed awake long after midnight. Some mornings I found her sitting alone in the kitchen with untouched coffee growing cold beside her. Whenever I asked what was wrong, she forced a smile and insisted everything was fine. I wanted to believe her, but every instinct told me she was hiding something. Then the strange behavior began. She started receiving phone calls that she always answered outside. She withdrew money from our savings without mentioning it. She left the house several afternoons each week, always returning emotionally exhausted. If I asked where she had gone, she simply answered that she had errands to run. Suspicion slowly poisoned my heart. The man I saw in the mirror became someone I barely recognized. I checked our bank statements obsessively. I searched for clues that would explain the growing distance between us. My imagination became far crueler than reality ever was. I convinced myself there had to be another man. Why else would she hide so much? Instead of asking difficult questions with patience, I built walls. I worked longer hours. I answered her short replies with even shorter ones. Our marriage slowly transformed into two people surviving beneath the same roof instead of living together. The breaking point came one Friday evening. I arrived home early, hoping to surprise Grace with dinner. Instead, I found the house empty. Nearly 2 hours later, she finally returned carrying nothing except an exhausted expression and red, swollen eyes. When I asked where she had been, she quietly said she wasn't ready to talk. Those 6 words broke something inside me. The following Monday, I met with a divorce attorney during my lunch break. Signing those papers felt strangely peaceful. I believed I was protecting myself from more disappointment. If she no longer wanted our marriage, I refused to beg someone to stay. 3 days later, everything changed. I reached home earlier than usual because heavy rain had shut down our construction site. As I walked toward the front porch, I heard voices through the slightly open kitchen window. Grace was speaking to her mother, Margaret. I never intended to listen, but then I heard my own name. I froze. Her voice trembled as she admitted she didn't know how much longer she could hide the truth from Nathan. She said every lie she told him felt like another crack in her heart. She confessed that she feared losing him more than she feared the illness itself. She cried because she couldn't bear watching the man she loved slowly begin to hate her, while she kept pretending everything was normal. My heartbeat stopped. Illness? There was no other man. No secret affair. Only a secret battle. Grace explained that nearly 8 months earlier doctors had diagnosed her with an aggressive autoimmune disease. Treatments weren't guaranteed to work, and medical expenses had already begun draining their savings. She had secretly picked up freelance bookkeeping work and quietly sold family jewelry because she refused to burden Nathan while Abigail was starting college. She believed that if the treatments failed, She wanted her husband and daughter to remember her as strong rather than fragile. Then came the sentence that crushed me completely. She admitted that every night after Nathan fell asleep, she quietly cried in the bathroom because she blamed herself for destroying the marriage she had spent 15 years building. I couldn't breathe. The envelope containing the divorce papers slipped from my hands onto the rain-soaked porch. Every accusation I had imagined, every cold shoulder, every angry silence, every suspicious thought, they all collapsed beneath the weight of one heartbreaking truth. The woman I believed had stopped loving me had actually been protecting me in the only way she knew. I walked into the house. Grace immediately wiped away her tears, pretending everything was normal again. But this time I refused to let another lie stand between us. Without saying a word, I placed the soaked divorce papers on the kitchen table. Her face turned completely pale. She looked at the envelope and then at me. Before she could apologize for something she never deserved to apologize for, I wrapped my arms around her tighter than I had in years. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Sometimes love says its greatest words through silence. Eventually, the truth poured out. She showed me every medical report, every prescription, every insurance rejection letter, every unpaid bill, every journal entry she had written during lonely nights when she thought I was asleep. Page after page described one overwhelming fear: not dying, leaving me alone. I cried harder than I had since my father's funeral. How had I become so blind? I had mistaken exhaustion for rejection, fear for dishonesty, sacrifice for betrayal. That evening became the first honest conversation we'd had in nearly a year. We stayed awake until sunrise discussing everything we had avoided for months. The following morning, we canceled every unnecessary expense. I sold my fishing boat without hesitation. Grace protested, but I reminded her that boats could always be replaced. She couldn't. I began attending every doctor's appointment. Instead of carrying the burden alone, she finally allowed me to share it. The treatments were brutal. Some days, she couldn't leave bed. Her hair became thinner. She lost weight. Simple walks around the neighborhood exhausted her. Yet somehow our marriage became stronger than it had been in years. Every hospital visit reminded us how precious ordinary mornings truly were. We started eating breakfast together again. Watching sunsets became more important than checking emails. Holding hands during chemotherapy sessions became our new definition of romance. Abigail eventually learned the truth. She transferred to a university closer to home so she could help care for her mother. Watching our daughter mature into such a compassionate young woman filled both of us with pride. Months later, our church organized a fundraiser after quietly learning about Grace's medical expenses. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years showed up carrying meals, handwritten cards, and prayers. For the first time, I realized how many people were willing to carry our burden if only we had allowed them. Healing didn't happen overnight. There were setbacks, scary test results, sleepless nights, moments when hope felt painfully fragile. But there were victories too. A scan showing improvement, a treatment finally working, a laugh returning to Grace's face, a family photograph where genuine smiles replaced forced ones. One spring afternoon, nearly 2 years later, we revisited the small park where I had proposed to Grace decades earlier. The same oak tree still stood overlooking the river. The same wooden bench remained there, weathered but faithful. I reached into my jacket pocket. This time it wasn't divorce papers. It was a new wedding ring. I asked her if she'd marry me again. She laughed through tears before whispering yes. We renewed our vows with only close family and friends present. No expensive decorations. No grand celebration. Just gratitude. The kind that only grows after nearly losing everything. Looking back now, I often wonder what would have happened if I had arrived home 5 minutes later that rainy afternoon. I probably would have handed Grace those divorce papers. I would have walked away from the woman who loved me enough to carry unbearable pain alone. And I would have spent the rest of my life regretting a decision built on assumptions instead of truth. Marriage isn't destroyed only by betrayal. Sometimes it's wounded by silence, by fear, by pride, by believing stories we invent before asking honest questions. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't simply to trust my wife. It was to choose compassion before conclusions. Because every person you love may be fighting a battle they haven't yet found the courage to explain. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes hope can still survive even the darkest seasons. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need them today. Before this story ends, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you had been in Nathan's place? Your words may encourage someone facing a similar struggle. That rainy afternoon began with divorce papers resting in my hands. It ended with something infinitely more valuable, a second chance. Sometimes the miracle we're praying for isn't the removal of life's storms. Sometimes the miracle is discovering that the person standing beside us never stopped loving us through the rain. And when we finally choose understanding over assumption, forgiveness over pride, and love over fear, even the most broken chapters can become the beginning of the most beautiful ending.